All right, let's dive into this deep dive on Canada's Home Buyers Plan. It's great that you're thinking about buying your first home, and we're here to help you figure out if the HBP can actually help make that dream a reality. We've got tons of resources here to help us out. Articles, government guides, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
And we're going to use all that to explore this program that could be a total game changer.
Yeah, it's definitely a popular program, and for good reason. I think, a lot of Canadians see it as like their ticket to home ownership. But like with any financial decision, there are some really important things to think about. So think of this deep dive as like a roadmap, right? It'll help you kind of navigate the whole HBP landscape and figure out, if it's the right path for you, like, does it make sense for your situation?
I love that, the roadmap analogy. That's great. Okay, so let's start with the basics. What exactly LEAS, the Home Buyers Plan?
So the HBP is basically, it's designed to give first-time home buyers this, financial boost by letting them withdraw funds from their RRSPs tax-free. And they can use that for a down payment. So essentially, it's like an interest-free loan from your future self to help you buy or even build a qualifying home here in Canada.
Okay, so an interest-free loan, that sounds pretty tempting, especially with like how crazy interest rates are these days. But I'm guessing there's got to be like a limit to how much you can actually borrow, right?
You're exactly right. There are some limits. And actually, those limits have changed just recently. So before April 16th of 2024, you could only withdraw up to $35,000 per person. But with the new rules, it's actually up to $60,000 each. So that means, if you've got a couple buying a home together, it's a potential down payment boost of $120,000.
Whoa. Okay, that's a pretty significant increase. That could be huge for someone trying to enter the housing market. Okay, so I know there are some rules about, who's eligible for this program. So let's break those down a bit. Who can actually use this HBP magic?
Okay, so imagine like you're starting a quest, right? And to unlock the treasure chest of HBP funds, you got to meet a few conditions. So first of all, you got to be a Canadian resident. That makes sense. It's a Canadian program, right?
Okay, yeah, you've got to be a Canadian resident. That makes sense. What else?
You also need a written agreement to, buy or build a qualifying home here in Canada. So we're talking signed offers, construction contracts, that kind of stuff. Those are like your golden tickets. And that home has to become your primary residence within 1 year of buying or building it. So you can't be using HBP funds to buy like a vacation property or anything like that.
Got to actually live in the place. Got to be a Canadian resident. Okay, what about this whole first-time home buyer rule? What does that actually mean?
So basically, you're considered a first-time home buyer if you haven't owned a home in the 4 years before you take the money out. So let's say you sold your last place 5 years ago, then you're good to go. So you don't have to be a true first-time buyer, as long as you've been out of the market for a little while.
Okay. So it's a bit more flexible than I thought. That's good. Yeah. Are there any exceptions to that rule at all?
Yeah, there are a few. An important one is for individuals with disabilities. So if you're eligible for the disability tax credit, then you're exempt from that first-time home buyer requirement. And that also applies if you're helping a relative with a disability buy a home.
Oh, that's great. Accessibility is so important. Okay, so let's say you've checked all those boxes. You're eligible, you're excited, you're ready to tap into those RRSP funds. How do you actually get your hands on the money?
Well, unfortunately, you can't just snap your fingers. There's some paperwork involved. Specifically, you'll need to fill out Form T236. It's from the Canada Revenue Agency. And it outlines, your eligibility, how much you're taking out, all those nitty-gritty details.
Forms. Fun times. So where do you even send this form?
So you're going to send it to your RRSP provider. So that could be your bank, a credit union, whoever manages your RRSP.
Okay, so it's specific form. Got to go through your RRSP provider. Anything else we should know about this whole withdrawal process?
Yeah, so this is where it gets a little interesting. Any funds that you withdraw for the HBP, they have to have been in your RRSP for at least 90 days. So it's kind of like, letting the funds simmer and season a bit before you take them out. This is actually a super important detail that trips people up a lot. Okay,
so no last-minute RRSP contributions and then immediately withdrawing for down payment.
Got it. Any other important rules around the withdrawals? You don't have to withdraw the entire $60,000 if you don't need it. You can withdraw any amount up to that limit as long as you have it available in your RRSP. And you can even make multiple withdrawals within the same calendar year, again, up to that maximum amount.
Okay, so there's some flexibility there. All right, so we've covered who's eligible, how much you can withdraw, that 90-day rule.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about the part that that makes me a little nervous, repayment. I mean, we're basically borrowing from our future selves here, right?
Yeah.
So what does paying back the HVP actually look like?
You're absolutely right. It Eterius alone, and understanding that whole repayment process is super important. The good news is you have 15 years to repay the full amount you borrowed, and as long as you stick to that repayment schedule, it stays completely interest free.
I mean, 15 years, that sounds like a pretty generous time frame. So how do they actually calculate how much you need to repay each year?
It's actually a really simple calculation. You just divide the total amount that you withdrew by 15. So let's say you withdraw the full $60,000. Well, your minimum annual repayment would be $4,000.
Okay, so $4,000 a year for 15 years
Yeah.
seems manageable.
Mm.
When do those repayments actually start, though?
So the first payment is typically due 2 years after you make that initial withdrawal. So you do get a little bit of breathing room after buying your home, to kind of settle in and get your finances organized. But there is a special provision that came out of Budget 2024. So if you withdrew HBP funds between January 1st, 2022 and December 31st, 2025, well, that repayment start date is actually pushed back to 5 years after you make the first withdrawal.
Oh, wow. Okay, so that's a nice bonus. A bit of extra breathing room there. What happens, though, if for whatever reason you can't make that minimum repayment in a given year?
Yeah, so this is where it's really important to be aware of the potential downsides. If you miss a repayment or even pay less than that minimum amount, well that shortfall gets added to your taxable income for that year, and that means, potentially much higher tax bill.
Yikes. Okay, that's a pretty big consequence. So it sounds like incorporating those HBP repayments into your budget, like right from day one, is pretty essential.
Absolutely. It's definitely a commitment, and it's one that shouldn't be taken lightly. One story that came up in the research was about Sophia. So she was approved for the HBP, she withdrew the money, but then her condo purchase actually fell through.
Oh no, that's got to be stressful, especially when you've already tapped into your RRSP. So what happened with the HBP money?
Luckily, she was actually able to cancel her HBP participation. Since she didn't end up buying a home, she was able to return the money to her RRSP without any penalty. So it was basically like hitting the undo button. But there is a deadline for that. Like, she had to put the money back into her RRSP by December 31st of the year after she received it.
Okay, that's good to know. There's some flexibility if a purchase falls through, as long as you act quickly.
Mm.
Did your research find any other situations like Sophia's?
Yeah, so Michael's story is a good example of what happens if if you can't buy or build within that required time frame. Remember, you typically have until October 1st of the year after you withdraw the money to make that purchase. Well, Michael, he ran into some delays, and he actually missed that deadline.
Oh, that sounds like it could lead to some penalties. Did he manage to avoid them?
He did. He was actually able to prove to the CRA that he met specific conditions. He had a written agreement to buy a home by October 1st of the following year. So it showed that he was still actively pursuing the purchase. So even though he missed that initial deadline, he had a firm plan in place.
Okay, so there are some wiggle room there, which is reassuring.
Yeah.
But I imagine there are definitely situations where you're simply not eligible anymore, right?
Absolutely, yeah. The CRA is very clear about, what qualifies. The HPP is really intended for buying or building your primary residence, and if you don't meet those requirements or the deadlines, well, those withdrawals are considered ineligible, and you'll have to, include that money as income on your tax return.
So no using those HPP funds for a dream vacation, I guess.
Exactly. All right, so let's shift gears a bit and dive into the financial pros and cons of the HBP. What are some of the things we should be weighing as we're considering this program?
Yeah, I think a balanced perspective is key here. So what are the main advantages of using the HPP?
I'd say one of the biggest draws is that it basically acts like an interest-free loan as long as you repay it on time. And that's a huge GE perk, especially with how high interest rates are these days.
Definitely. An interest-free loan is pretty enticing. Any other advantages beyond that?
Yeah, so the other big benefit is that it can really dramatically boost your buying power. So let's say you've saved $30,000 for a down payment, right? Well, the HBP could double that to $60,000 or even more if your partner is eligible too. And that larger down payment, it opens doors to homes that you might not have been able to afford otherwise, and it can also help you avoid those costly mortgage insurance premiums.
That's a pretty compelling reason to consider the HPP. It sounds like it could really accelerate someone's path to home ownership. But I know you mentioned some potential downsides too. So what are those trade-offs to keep in mind?
So one of the things to consider is that it does require you to have existing RRSP savings. You need to have those funds in your RRSP for at least 90 days, remember, before you can withdraw them.
Right. So it's not like a magic solution for those who are just starting to save.
Mhm.
It's about using the savings you already have in a strategic way.
Exactly. And even if you do have a pretty healthy RRSP balance, there's another big factor. You're taking that money out of your retirement savings. So it means it's no longer growing, tax sheltered within that RRSP.
Right. So you're potentially trading off those future gains in your RRSP for the benefit of home ownership now. That's got to be a tough decision.
It is, and it really comes down to individual priorities and circumstances. If homeownership is your top priority and you're comfortable with the potential impact on your retirement savings, then the HPP might be a good fit. But if you're a little behind on your retirement savings or you're not quite sure about buying a home just yet, then it might be wiser to leave those RSP funds untouched for now.
And you mentioned earlier about those missed HBP repayments being added to your taxable income. Can you elaborate on that a bit more? That seems like a pretty big risk.
It is a risk, and it's one that shouldn't be minimized. If you fail to make that minimum repayment, that unpaid amount gets added to your income for tax purposes. So you're not just dealing with a missed payment. You're potentially facing a much higher tax bill too.
Yeah, a double whammy. No one wants that. So careful planning and financial discipline are definitely essential when using the HBP.
Absolutely. You need a really clear understanding of your income, your expenses, and your future goals. And sometimes even if you are eligible for the HBP, exploring other options like a traditional mortgage or waiting to buy until you've saved up a bit more, those might actually make more sense financially.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that the HBP isn't, free money. It's a tool that needs to be used thoughtfully and with a plan.
I couldn't agree more. Gathering information from reliable sources and even seeking professional financial advice, those are essential steps.
Yeah, speaking of those reliable sources, our research actually uncovered some great tips from financial experts on how to really maximize the HBP. What strategies kind of stood out to you?
I think the most important one is to contribute to your RSP consistently and well before you plan to actually use the HBP. Remember that 90-day rule. You don't want to wait until the last minute to start saving.
Right. So if home ownership is on your horizon in the next year or two, now's the time to start bumping up those RSP contributions. What other advice did you come across?
Well, if you're buying with a partner, make sure that both of you are using the HBP, if you're both eligible, of course. You can basically double your potential down payment that way, which is, a huge advantage.
Yeah, teamwork towards that shared goal.
Yeah.
And we also touched on how you don't have to withdraw that full $60,000. So maybe each partner withdraws a bit less, based on their individual RRSP balances.
Yeah, that's smart thinking. And another great strategy for repayment is to contribute more than the minimum each year, if you can, of course. That way you're reducing your HBP balance faster, and you're minimizing the risk of those missed payments and those potential tax issues.
Yeah, like building in that safety net.
Yeah.
Any other wisdom from the financial experts?
One suggestion that I thought was really helpful was to use a tax-free savings account, or TFSA, alongside your RRSP. So while the HBP is specifically for those RRSP funds, a TFSA can be a great complement for your additional savings, because you can withdraw from a TFSA anytime, tax-free, which gives you a lot more flexibility.
Yeah, having that diversified savings approach makes a lot of sense. Long-term savings in your RRSP, and then that more flexible option with the TFSA. Did you learn about any other helpful savings programs for first-time homebuyers?
Yeah, so there's the First Home Savings Account, or FHSA, and this one kind of combines the best features of an RRSP and a TFSA.
That sounds promising. So how does it work?
So like an RRSP, contributions to an FHSA are tax deductible, so you get that upfront tax break. But like a TFSA, withdrawals for a qualifying home purchase are tax free.
Oh wow! So you get that tax benefit on both ends of the process. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Is there a limit to how much you can contribute?
Yeah, so the annual contribution limit is $8,000 and there's a lifetime limit of $40,000. So it's not as much as the HBP's $60,000 withdrawal limit, but it's still a considerable amount for a down payment.
And the best part is you can actually combine the FHSA and the HBP for the same home purchase.
Exactly. It's a powerful combination. Imagine, maxing out your FHSA at $40,000 and then adding another $60,000 from the HBP. That's $100,000 for your down payment. And if you're buying with a partner who's also eligible for both programs, well, the possibilities are even greater.
Yeah, that's a great example of how strategically using these programs can make home ownership so much more attainable. So to recap, planning, saving diligently, using these tools wisely, and exploring other options like the FHSA, all of that can make a huge difference.
It's all about making those informed financial decisions and taking control of your path to home ownership.
All right, so we've covered a lot: eligibility, withdrawal, repayment, pros and cons, strategic tips. But there's one crucial aspect of the HBP that we haven't really talked about yet. Yeah, we've really explored all those nuts and bolts of the HBP. But what about the bigger picture? How might tapping into your RSP affect like your long-term financial goals? Especially when it comes to retirement. That's a trade-off that I think deserves some really careful consideration.
Yeah, it's a question a lot of first-time home buyers struggle with for sure. When you're taking money out of your RSP, especially a big chunk like the HBP allows, well, you're basically hitting pause on that whole compounding growth thing, and that can have some pretty significant implications down the road.
You've mentioned compounding a few times. Can you maybe unpack that a little bit for our listener?
Yeah.
Why is it so important, especially when we're talking about saving for retirement?
Sure. So imagine like a snowball rolling down a hill. The longer it rolls, the bigger it gets, right? Well, that's kind of like compounding in action. Your investments, they're generating earnings, and then those earnings generate even more earnings. It's this snowball effect that can, really lead to significant growth over time. But when you take money out of your RRSP, it's like you're stopping that snowball before it has a chance to really get going. Those funds are no longer contributing to that powerful growth cycle.
So you're potentially giving up some of those future gains just for that immediate benefit of a larger down payment. How do you even begin to weigh those two things against each other? It seems like such a complicated decision.
Yeah, it is complex, and there's no like one size fits all answer. It really depends on your individual situation. Your age, your income, how much you've already saved for retirement, your risk tolerance, and just your overall financial goals.
So it sounds like having a really clear understanding of your whole financial picture and thinking about those long-term implications, not just the excitement of buying that home right now. That's really important. What kind of questions should people be asking themselves as they're, considering the HBP?
Here are a few to kind of ponder. How much have you already put into your RSP? Are you on track to meet your retirement savings goals? If you use the HBP, will you be able to comfortably make those repayments and contributing to your RSP to kind of catch up? What about your other financial priorities? Are there other goals like, saving for your kids' education or who's starting a business, things that might be impacted by using the HBP?
Those are such great questions. It's not just about buying the house. It's about making sure that decision really aligns with your overall financial well-being. It seems like this is definitely a conversation to have with like a financial advisor, someone who can really help you analyze your situation and figure out, what's the best path forward.
A financial advisor can be such a valuable resource, you're right. They can help you assess your risk tolerance, project that potential investment growth, and even model those different HBP repayment scenarios. So they'll really empower you to make a well-informed decision that takes into account both your short-term A&D, your long-term goals.
Yeah, having that expert guidance can make all the difference.
Yeah.
All right, so we've covered a lot in this deep dive. Eligibility, withdrawal, repayment, the pros and cons, strategic tips, even that potential impact on your retirement savings.
Yeah.
What's your final takeaway for our listener? What's the key message you want them to really remember?
So The HBP, it really have as a fantastic tool for first-time home buyers here in Canada. It can help you enter the market sooner, maybe buy a bigger place, or even reduce those mortgage payments. But it is super important to approach it with a really good understanding of both the opportunities and indeed those potential risks. So don't rush into a decision just based on the excitement of buying that first home. Take the time to really educate yourself, plan carefully, and seek out that expert advice to make sure that this program truly aligns with your overall financial goals.
Such an important reminder. It's about making informed decisions, not just impulsive ones.
Exactly. And remember, there are other programs out there too, like that FHSA we talked about, that can also help you achieve that homeownership dream. So it's all about, finding the right combination of tools and strategies for your specific circumstances.
Well, this deep dive has been incredibly informative. I feel like I've learned so much, and I hope our listener feels the same way. Is there one final thought you want to leave them with as they kind of embark on their home buying journey?
So we've focused a lot on the financial side of the HBP, but let's not forget about the emotional aspect too. Buying a home, it's a huge decision, financially and emotionally. So don't let the excitement cloud your judgment. Take the time to really assess if you're truly ready for this commitment in terms of your finances, and your lifestyle. It's a big step, but with careful planning and thoughtful decision making, it can be, one of the most rewarding experiences of your life.
It's such a great point. It's about finding that balance between, being financially prepared and being emotionally ready.
Well, we hope this deep dive has given you the knowledge and the insights you need to navigate the HBP confidently and ultimately make the best choices for your situation. Good luck on your path to homeownership. Here's to new beginnings and happy house hunting.
And that wraps up our deep dive into Canada's Home Buyers Plan. We'll be back soon with another insightful deep dive on a topic that matters to you. Until then, happy learning.